Good afternoon. Yes. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good morning for some. Excuse me while I put my ears on so the people who are live with me on Instagram can hear me very well. Y'all know me. I'm Dr. Maisha, founder of the Mind ReMapping Academy, and you will see here that I'm in a different place. So I thought, of course, I love the red couch, but I felt like being in a chair today. So you'll see a little bit different in me. Now, you might see me looking back and forth between two cameras because I'm on two platforms, just so that you know that. So today, and I've been promising you all this for the duration, we're going to talk a little bit about values. Um, if you want to know what motivates us, what motivates people, what motivates you, then you take a look at your values. And if you want to know why sometimes you get uh, pushed off, drawn off of a path that you've been on, or why a certain path that you're on after a big life change stops working for you, take a look at your values. And so, our values, people have different contexts for what values are. And so we have like surface values, we have our surface values, and then we have our deeper, like subsurface values are just on the surface, and then we have our deep core belief values. And excuse me, let me drink some water here. Our core values, those are the things that really drive us, like core unconscious values. Those are the things that really drive us. And so when at our deepest, what we're motivated by are these deep beliefs that usually get installed somewhere in our early years. So a little bit more about the levels of values. You have values from the level of self, and these are our core deeper values that motivate us. But you also have values at the level of community, society, and the world. And when we talk about values in that way, sometimes I refer to them as values levels. And values levels are like how we think that also determine the way we do the things, why we do the things we do. So a lot of times people will have these behaviors, or you'll be on a path, or like as a mom, our children will do certain things, and we won't understand why. Or we'll be talking with someone about something, maybe trying to sell a program, maybe trying to motivate an employee, and if we're not speaking into their values, then it'll just go over their head. Another thing is, someone might be at a job, be at a company, or be a partner, be in a partnership, and then all of a sudden, without warning, they did. Why? It might have been because of values violation. So when we talk about the things that motivate us at our deepest level, we're talking about these values. Now, sometimes people create values like, oh, what's important to me is money. What's important to me is providing for my family. What's important to me is looking good. Those can be values at the surface level, but when we start to look at the deeper level of values, we're looking at things like um, integrity and feeling loved and accepted, and happiness. So a lot of times those deeper level of values, they're a lot more what we call high chunk. They're a lot more general speaking than they are the specific long phrases. Those specific long phrases, if you dig deep enough, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you discover your own values, but if you dig deep enough, those long phrases get shorter and shorter and shorter until you start to get themes. And if you want to get to the core of what motivates you or motivates someone else, you're going to get those themes. The themes are the things that are at our deepest core. Now, our values can either be toward something, or they can be away from something. And it's important to know, and you've often heard me talk about, if you follow me, if you listen to the podcast, if you listen to these lives, you'll hear me distinguish moving toward a goal versus moving away from a pain point, right? And there's a difference, because you will be motivated. If you're moving away from something, you'll be motivated only as long as you're uncomfortable. And then when that discomfort goes away, or when that discomfort goes away, then people tend to take their foot off the gas. When you're motivated towards something, then typically you'll keep your foot on the gas until you achieve that goal. And a lot of people who are toward motivated usually have a goal after that. So it's important to understand sort of these big concepts as we sort of dig into, well, how do you even get your values? So I'm going to tell you a story about how this like looks in real life. So for me, I'm in my third career. And one of the things that was a catalyst for my career change, for me to step out of clinical medicine, was that there was a shift in my values. And the shift was this. So I had spent all of my life, by the way, I had my son when I was 39. So my birthday's coming up next week. I'll be 47-ish, 47. And so my son's, he's school age. He's 7.5. I spent my entire life in my career, and for a long time, that was my biggest value, like really being being successful in my career and making enough money and being stable and finding, like, those types of things were like my higher values. And I just want to say hi to everyone who joined. Thank you for joining. And so those are my highest values, that the career, those were the things, that was the thing that motivated me. But as soon as I found that I was pregnant with my son, that was a huge life change that began to shift my values. So sometimes we think that when these values are installed and we're born with these types of beliefs and values, that they can't be changed. Now, by the way, beliefs are clustered around values. So sometimes we will have beliefs that are based on these core values. Like, one of my big core values is integrity. That is doing what you say you're going to do, telling the truth. And when you're not going to do what you said you're going to do, making a new agreement. So I have a set of beliefs around that. And that those beliefs and that value drive my behavior, significantly drive my behavior. And so it's important to understand that those beliefs that you have are driven by your core values. And if you shift the value, the beliefs will begin to shift as well. So when I do work one-on-one with people and we start to discover what their values are, as we get rid of the negative conversations, the limiting beliefs and decisions, and work with the values, we start to see the beliefs change and stay shifted. And also we uncover what the true values are in the process. So when I got pregnant with my son, my values shifted almost immediately. I was 38 at the time, and I knew that maybe I was 30. Yes, I was 38 at the time, and I knew that I had spent my entire life in my career, but I really wanted to something else. Like, I was committed to being the kind of mom that could be free to be wherever I need to be with my son, and I felt like it was time. And so that significantly shifted my values, which motivated me to look for, how can I create that scenario? Now, you remember we talked about last time putting stuff in your future, putting goals in the future, putting visions in the future. So I had to really get to the core of, well, what is it that my core values are now? Not when I was in med school, not when I was in residency, but now. And what I discovered was family and freedom and autonomy and flexibility moved way up. Now, autonomy and flexibility, I think, were always there, but flexibility and moved way up in the chain, and family became number one. Now, like I said, integrity and all of that, those are like still big ones, but that's like integrity, and then like families like right after that. If I were to list my values, that would be right at the top. And so what that did was that create a scenario where I was like, okay, time to sell my practice. And it wasn't for money, it was for I got to get out. I got to get out so I can be with my son. I can be the mom that I envisioned that I would always be. So that's how strong values are as a motivator, strong enough to have you turn your life around upside down. Let's talk about how that works with other people, because and especially I like to talk about how this works as a parent, but also as a business owner, as a person who leads teams. Values is significantly important. When I used to manage people, like in my business, in my former business, in my practice, as I interviewed them, one of the things that I always asked was, what's important to you about this position? What's important to you about what I do as an integrative medicine physician? What's important about that? And in doing that, I would get to hear what the values were and then whether they align or not. We're going to talk about alignment of values, because it's very important when you're going walking your path, but also when you're listening for whether or not there's compatibility or incompatibility in relationship. And that's any relationship. That's business relationship, employer employer, romantic, friendship. You know, alignment of values is very important. So I would ask them, thank you. I would ask them, what is it about this job that's important to you? And then I would listen. And sometimes I go a little deeper than that. So, for example, I was chatting with an organization who we're about to do some potentially do some DEI consulting. And one of the things I always ask is, what's important to you about the work? What's important to you about getting this strategy? And then when they tell me, I say, well, what's important about that? So the person said, well, what's important about DEI strategy is having a structured framework for sustainability. And I said, well, what's important about that? And we went a little deeper, right? The sense of belonging and accountability, and so that this work will sustain long after the roles change. And then I said, well, what's important about that? So it's important, as you think about, as you ask about, as you elicit these values in yourself or in your others, to not stop at that surface level, because you'll really start to get the core of what people believe in and what's important to them. And then what's important is to speak inside of that. Now, I'm gonna speak as a parent now, because I love, you all know I love talking about my son. One of the things as parents that we especially as old school parents, I talk, there's this distinction. We got like old school. I'm a Gen X, raised by a boomer. And and so my foot is on the line between this old way of thinking and this new way of being. And so I always, as I learn this work, I always apply it to my parenting. I actually teach this in my trainings. I teach a lot about how to apply this to your kids and their relationships, your kids and your parenting, to make things a lot easier with your kids. So with my son, one of the things I always ask him is what's important to him about, like, whatever it is, right? So with grades, for example, my son, he's in first grade, but he's already has a mindset of excelling and getting straight A's. But I asked him what's important about that. Like, what is important about you making good grades? Because I want to know. And what that will do is it will give me information on how to motivate him when he's not feeling like doing his homework, or when he's um, wanting to go play first or whatever. And we never have a problem with homework, but it's just one of the things that I ask. What's important to him about Kung Fu? What's important to him about Kung Fu? He was, oh, I want to get my next sash. And that's important for me to know, because if I know that what's important to him about Kung Fu is getting to the highest sash, I mean, he's 7, so that would be, about right, then I can motivate him to practice by speaking into the fact that what's important to him is to get that next sash. If you want to get that next sash, you need to practice your forms, you need to practice your combos, you need to practice your applications, you need to make sure your punches are tight, your forms are tight, right? So this is the way I communicate with him, so that it pretty much eliminates the resistance of, "Well, I don't wanna," right? What's important to you about our relationship. He loves love and hugs and all of those things. So it is apparent, even when you're speaking into the listening of your child, it dissolves the resistance a lot of times. Kids will be kids, so it's not perfect. But for the most part, it makes your household a lot um, more peaceful of a household. So you see all of these various areas where values come into play. And let's talk about what happens when values aren't aligned, particularly in relationship to one relationship to another. So I'll share with you, when I first got into came out of residency. I actually it really started even before then, like how I got on this path of really being outside of the box in what I do, because I always have been. And when I graduated from residency back in 2004, before integrative medicine was a big thing, and before it was actually a American board specialty. But what drove me was sort of my value to want to sit with patients and get to know them and create relationships and actually get to the root cause of their illness, right? So that's what drove me. And one of the reasons I couldn't stay inside, I couldn't work inside of how do you say, the traditional system that we now have of medicine, like the big box system, was because there was a misalignment of values. So anywhere that you are where there's a misalignment of values or a values violation, you will not stay. If you're wondering why, perhaps you're going from job to job, or you're jumping from out of the flame and into the fire, so to speak. When I used to do a lot of work with career transition and physicians, one of the things that was very common was for docs to tell me that, well, they went from this job to this job and they thought it was better at first, but then it ended up being more of the same. And then they are ready to leave that job and go to the next job. And one of the reasons is because if you don't consider the values of the organization that you're stepping into inside of an interviewing process, then you'll step into something that eventually will violate your values. And then when that happens, it'll be time to go. So as you're looking at relationships, particularly business relationships and romantic relationships, yeah, very very simple but yet profound concept. You want to ask people what's important to them when in relationships, dating relationships particularly. One of the first conversations, one of the things you listen for. Now you can ask the question, and you can informally elicit someone's values, but you can also listen. As a person talks, the more you are in dialogue. This is why it's so important to have dialogue with people, to be in conversation with people, because the more you listen and the deeper you listen, the more you'll begin to hear what's important to people at the core level, because it'll come up over and over again in conversation across themes or context for one's life. So what in relationship, it's important to understand what is important, what's important about family, what's important about children, what's important about money, what's important about the environment in which you live in, the city, right? I'm working with a doc who has having a major life change, and a very positive one. And in making this life change, the first thing I asked is, what's important to you about moving to another city, and revisiting the values of what she wants in a job, in a career, and how things have shifted. So when you're in relationship, you want to look at those, because where the values are misaligned, that will create the deeper problems, even if you can't see it right away. It's tempting to hear that there's a dissension of values and say, well, it can work out. Like over time, they'll change. Core values don't change unless people want them to change, unless a person is specifically doing the work to shift those values, to reorganize and hierarchy those values. It will not change. So if you're interviewing a person for a job, if you're a coach interviewing a client, if you're a person who's dating, then you might want to consider that the values won't change unless the person wants them to change. So you take that stuff at face value. And you can always have the dialogue about these dissension of values and see what happens next. Again, communication is everything. Um, in terms of like if you're already in, let's say you're in a relationship or you're in a company and you already have a relationship with people, and for the most part the values are pretty concordant, but then there are some little things that that need to be shifted in order for you to really get into flow. When you really want to get into flow in a relationship, in a company, in a family, you align your values. And what that means, it doesn't mean that someone else's values become your values or your values become someone else's values. Alignment means in sync. So you come up with a set of values for a particular thing together. So let's say again, I can speak about this in multiple domains, in family, in relationship, in organizations. So from an organizational perspective, boards, um, C-suite, if you are organizing around a particular goal or vision, you might want to elicit values for that goal or vision, right? What's important about that goal or vision, and have everybody aligned with that. So with that, there's a particular process that can be done that aligns everyone's values. And then what that does is it takes a group from storming to norming. So if you're in business and organization, if you're in teams, even in families, it's this way as well. Groups go from forming, right? Coming together, forming to storming. That's like an adjustment period. And then norming, which is like really kind of getting in the groove. And then performing is when you're in sync. And so aligning values takes you from that storming to norming and takes you from norming to performing. And this again, cross contextual. If you're in a family, let's say family, everything's going well, but you guys want to just be completely in sync on a few things. You can actually align your values, and I've seen it done, and I've seen the performance go out of the box with that. So it's important to understand that concept of alignment of values. Now, I wouldn't probably do the process of alignment of values unless you're in a relationship, in a type of relationship, whether personal or business, where you've been in that relationship and you just want to go from good to even better, right? Or from storming, like adjustment, quickly all the way through norming and performing. All right. Yeah, I think that you have to take the time in relationships to get to know each other, and those personal relationships to get to know each other before you start, creating alignment of values. But if the values are mostly aligned, then that's actually a good sign. If you're aligned on most things, then that's like actually a good sign. If there are some values that are misaligned, it's not a death sentence. You have to consider what values are most important, right? So if the top values are misaligned, well, that's a problem. But if, let's say, fun is a value and it's like number five of six or five or seven or something like that, and then the other person's value is number three, well, it's not too much of a descent. Like fun is not number one and then not number 10. That would be a huge descent. So you want to look at, well, how important if you have a misalignment of values, how important are the values that are misaligned to you and to the relationship? Because that too will tell you what is what is the potential longevity of the relationship. So it's not just all, and it doesn't have to be all the values that are aligned. I'm not suggesting that either. What I'm suggesting is the probably top five values should be similar, should be somewhat aligned, three to five, I would say, in any relationship. So that's important to know. Now, what happens when you are in a relationship or in a company and you suddenly get the urge to leave or the urge to go. You might look at, hey, is there a value shift? Is there a priority shift? Now, it could be there's that, or it could be there's a boundary violation. There's a difference, right? Boundary violations are different from value violations, and boundary violations don't constitute the end of something unless it is a major violation of the value at the same time. If there's a boundary violation, can you reset the boundary? Can you reset it in a different way? Is there dialogue that can happen that can reset and restore the integrity of the relationship? That's the question to ask. But if it's a boundary violation that also crosses a value violation, it will then give you the urge to move somewhere else, to move in a different direction. Oftentimes, I see this with career change or with the desire to move from one level to another in business and finances, with big age shifts. I would say that probably um, turning a decade older, like in the 40s or the 50s, and sometimes it's a half decade. 35 for women is considered advanced maternal age. I remember when that happened for me, and I didn't have my son yet, so that's a significant mile marker. So mile markers in age can lead to value shifts. um, Big life events, getting married, getting divorced, losing a close loved one, can create major value shift. Think about what just happened over the last 2 years. The tridemic, the pandemic with COVID, the racial tension and the violence. Like those things they bring up the core deepest of our values, and sometimes they they shift our values, right? We start to see things and realize that what we thought was important to us is no longer important to us. And it is okay to shift values. It's okay that our values change. I think it's actually a sign of evolution. It is a sign of growth when our values change and shift over time. And so we need to see it that way. Sometimes the people who get left behind because of the value shifts, uh, those are the people who can start to realize that, well, maybe these incompatibilities that happen, they're for a purpose, right? They're for a purpose, and people often can grow apart. They can grow apart, they can grow back together. But it's all an evolutionary process. So values can evolve, just like beliefs can change and evolve. And values can, shift suddenly because of life circumstances. And then, values can be aligned and then become misaligned. And they become misaligned in relationship due to various things. As one person evolves, if another person's not evolving at the same level, those values that used to be aligned may become misaligned. And then there's something to do about that called having a conversation about what's to do next. All right. And so that's sort of the primer on values. Now, how do you begin to really get at the core values? Is just like listening for what's important to people at their core. And I've said it a couple of times, but I think it bears repeating, is that you can ask someone what's important to you about X, and they'll tell you. And and then you can go deeper, like, well, what's important to you about that? And you'll start to get these themes, right? You'll start to get these themes like, to have freedom. I want to be free to move around, or I want to, be able to do things on my own terms, or, I want to be able to leave a legacy for my kid. It's a big one for me. Legacy is huge. Contribution is huge for me. Being, and not just a legacy for my child, but a legacy for the next generation of children. It's kind of why I do the work with parenting and do the work also with diversity, equity, inclusion, is because I love the fact that when I'm gone, this world's got to be better than the way I came into it. And even though right now it seems like, we're taking a little bit of a backslide, I believe that with all of the amazing things that people are doing right now in this world, that I can see that, eventually we'll reach that tipping point, hopefully sooner than later. So This is the primer of values. We'll hear this come up as a theme over and over again. Violation of values, evolution of values, values level thinking, and we might talk a little bit about values level thinking in the future. Um, and then how to, the alignment and misalignment of values. You'll hear those themes come up, and when you hear them come up, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and at the level to which I'm talking about. So that's all for today, my friends. I promised you that I was going to talk to you about values, and I did that. And of course, as usual, you know that I teach these tools. I teach them in my trainings, the tools of neurolinguistic programming, the tools of conscious use of language, the tools of language of influence, and I teach them specifically to people who really want to. Oh, okay. Looks like my internet did a thing. I am also um, creating programs specifically for conscious parenting these days. So if you are wanting to train specifically on the conscious use of language as a parent, um, to be more effective in your communication with your child, that's something that I'm beginning to create programs for very specifically because, as I told you, legacy is very, very important to me. So on that's one arm of my business, and then the other arm is the diversity, equity, inclusion consulting. And so the work that I do is the people work aspect of it, which is again, you know, the strategy, but also the alignment of values and the training beyond uh, beyond bias. I mean, bias is an important part, but beyond that, and what to do after the fact. So this is the work that I'm steeped in. Yes, I have two different arms. They're two very different arms of my business, but I do that because they're both aligned with the big value of contribution and of legacy and of integrity. Those three big values, and family as well. So they're all aligned inside of that value, even though they're two different arms. And of course, I also do one-on-one coaching as well, in that domain of the deep personal work to get rid of old negative emotions and old limiting beliefs, so that you can be your best self and go out and create these unimaginable results that you want in your life. So if you want any of that, you know how to reach me. I say it every time. You can reach out to me directly by messenger. You can, if you're here with me on Instagram, you can click that link right in my bio, and it'll give you the links to view my trainings, but also to schedule a call with me. And if you're with me here on Facebook or LinkedIn, you can also message me directly as well, and then I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And then, of course, if you're joining me on YouTube, there's usually going to be a link in the description to schedule with me if you want to as well. So that's either for the training, one-on-one, or if you're an organization, you're with me on LinkedIn, then you can reach out to me directly in the messenger. So you all have a wonderful rest of the day. I look forward to next week. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about next week, but I usually I like to keep it relevant to what I'm seeing both in the world and in my circles of influence. The questions that I get asked is how I create this content. So I hope that you found it very useful today, and I look forward to seeing you all again. All right, leave a comment. Let me know what you got. And if you have any questions, I'm checking the comments as well. So please feel free to ask questions in the comments, and I will happily answer those. All right, take care, be safe, be well, and I'll see you next time. Namaste.